Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Supreme Court dismisses appeal by former Imo State Governor Emeka Ehedoha seeking to overturn judgment sacking him from office. Apex Court insists it does not have competence to review its own judgment. Chinese national quarantined in Lagos for suspected coronavirus tests negative to the disease. State government says confirmed case in Nigeria remains only one. House of Representatives resolves to suspend plenary for 2 weeks as it expresses worry over coronavirus risk due to porosity of National Assembly complex. And Iran temporarily frees over 54,000 prisoners as part of measures to combat the new coronavirus spread. We also have business, sports and news from Abuja, the FCT, and later from our London studios. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch the Channels TV's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms at Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. We'll stay with legal matters for now. A federal high court in Abuja today dismissed an application by the former spokesperson of the Islamist sect Boko Haram, Ali Sanda Koduga, alleging unlawful detention by the Department of State Service after serving his jail term. Mr. Koduga, who was convicted for terrorism and sentenced to 3 years in prison by a magistrate court in 2011, had approached the federal high court to enforce his fundamental human rights. He claims to have been unlawfully detained for an extra 3 years by the DSS after serving his jail term. However, Justice Amwoli Chikere of the Federal High Court in Abuja dismissed his prayer for a 500 million naira compensation for the alleged breach of his fundamental human rights for lack of merit. Let's get more news now from Ibrahim Adra in Abuja. Hi, Ibrahim. Always great to see you.
See you as always. Well, like you had in our top stories, the Chinese national earlier taken into quarantine by health officials in Lagos has tested negative to the coronavirus. The Chinese national was accosted at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport after he was made to go through the mandatory screening. He was thereafter moved to the Lagos State Isolation Center, where he tested negative to the virus. The Lagos State government says the Italian national, who is currently in isolation, remains the only positive case of COVID-19 in the country.
But we've only at the moment got one patient. He's in one of our newly refurbished isolation units. So there are 14 beds in his ward, and he's the only one in there. We have an extremely sophisticated laboratory. It's called a Biosafety Level 3 laboratory. We've been building it for 4 years. We've been training what we call the Lagos Biobanking Biosecurity Team for 3 years. They're specialists qualified in biosafety, biosecurity, and biothreat reduction. They're certified by international standards. And that is why we're able to give assistance to Ogun State. People criticize us for taking patients from another state. Well, we have to. In terms of the airline, there were 159 passengers on that flight, including the crew. 67 of them are in Lagos. We've managed to reach 41, and 35 are not reachable. Now, what does that mean? It either means that they've given us wrong information on the forms, or wrong addresses, or they're just, the numbers they've given us just don't work, or they've moved out of the area. So where we have some information on where they come from, we will be using the World Health Organization and other international bodies to send an alert to that country to say that we have information on a passenger on this flight, and he may have come into contact with a confirmed coronavirus COVID-19 case.
Meanwhile, the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu, is currently under self-quarantine for possible infection of the deadly coronavirus. The Minister of Health, Dr. Osage Hanire, told the leadership of the Senate today that Dr. Ihekweazu went into self-quarantine after his return from China to Nigeria and will remain in quarantine in his house for 14 days. Mr. Hanire was at the National Assembly to brief the Senate leadership on the level of preparedness of Nigeria to contain the coronavirus.
The Minister of Health is at the National Assembly to brief the Senate leadership on the level of preparedness of Nigeria to contain the spread of coronavirus. At the last count, 3,137 people have died from the virus, with Nigeria recording its index case in the person of an Italian man who flew into Nigeria from Milan. Health authorities say the Italian is in a stable condition.
My name is Dr.
The minister discloses a recent development involving the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Mr. Chikwe Ihekweazu. He also gives an update of the strategies by the ministry to prevent the spread of the virus.
We were very honored when among those scientists chosen to go to China to study it was the Director General of our own Center for Disease Control, Dr. Chikwe. But we have already established rules here that anybody who has been to China will go into self-quarantine. So Chikwe has gone and come back, he's done the test, is negative, but we have insisted that he must undergo the 14 days of quarantine, which is why he's not here today. He's not allowed to come out until after 14 days, because if you make the rule, you must also obey it.
The Senate President has reservations about setting up additional isolation centers in teaching hospitals.
We want teaching hospitals to clear space for us. I have my fears. I don't know if the teaching hospitals are filled up, what happens?
I think that the Ministry of Health should be empowered to purchase the temperature gauge, the mobile one, not the hand-carried one, so that you can get into the plane and find out people who have issues. So we won't allow even the person to start coming, because once that person comes down, he starts meeting our staff one after the other before he comes to that temperature gauge. By so doing, you have already many people who have infected.
Lawmakers also request that the Ministry of Health should establish permanent standard isolation centers in the country to respond to future emergencies. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
Many thanks, Linda. Meanwhile, the Director General of the NCDC, Dr. Chikwe Ihekweazu, says he is not sick and neither is he in quarantine. Rather, he explains that he is only in self-isolation for 14 days. Dr. Ihekweazu made the clarification in a social media tweet where he said that the news that he is in quarantine is false. He adds that I am well and I have continued my duties from home since my return from China as part of the WHO China mission on COVID-19. The NCDC boss says he looks forward to returning to office after the self-isolation. In a related development, lawmakers in the House of Representatives, for them, a plan to suspend plenary for 2 weeks won't be a bad idea, as it will enable the National Assembly management put measures in place against the coronavirus. The decision of the House follows a motion of urgent public importance by Representative Onyemedem on the need for immediate action to prevent any new cases of the virus. The lawmakers are worried that the porosity of the National Assembly puts it at great risk of the virus. Our correspondent Terry Kume reports that no date has been fixed for the suspension.
As Tuesday's plenary session got underway in the House of Representatives, unusually there was only one matter of urgent public importance, and it was on COVID-19, with lawmakers urging the federal government to devise new means in ensuring that no new cases are reported.
Honorable colleagues,
one lawmaker wears a face mask as a preventive measure,
we are in different Facebook groups.
and another raises concern that the socio-economic implications of COVID-19 could be very disastrous for the country if new cases are recorded.
Concerned that with the current situation of health facilities in Nigeria,
The virus, if not properly checked or curtailed, will easily be transmitted within the large population and may lead to a wider catastrophe. Note that the federal government needs to move swiftly and intensify collaborations with health agencies to nip it in the bud.
Despite the efforts of the federal government to contain the index case, the lawmakers believe more can be done.
I would like us to take our campaign and awareness, especially to the rural places. Our people at the grassroots, they should be aware of this disease. Most of them, they might not have heard about it.
There are only 2 control centers, one in Lagos, one in Abuja. That of Abuja, we are told, is less than 30% completion. Even the one in Lagos, that place was constructed and equipped by the Lagos State government.
In amending the prayers of the motion, the minority leader wants the National Assembly to take precaution.
An Italian man who visited Ogun State, and it turned out to be the constituency of Isiaka that is speaking. I think, Mr. Speaker, in good wisdom, that this House should suspend plenary for a period of 2 weeks or thereabout, for the purpose of certifying everybody and also allowing management to put measures in place so that all of us can be tested.
Those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those against say nay. That's have it.
No date has been set for the 2-week suspension. Meanwhile, the House also adopts another motion on the need to promote local production of drugs. The House of Representatives has mandated its committees on health institutions and healthcare services to organize a roundtable that will promote the local production of these drugs. And it is also charging the federal government to invest in research and development of locally made drugs. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
When the news at 10 returned, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele tours Dangote Refinery in Lagos, says project will boost Nigeria's economy. Join us again.